Begin log. The Forerunners have cast a long shadow, remnants of their machines and structures scattered about the galaxy, standing largely in pristine condition, as if the makers had just stepped out and would return at any moment. Mysterious and beyond comparison, a testament to their power. To the San-Shayum, whose civilization arose in the shadow of such structures, it was inevitable they would see in them gods. Their culture, language, and philosophies all shaped by their observation of the relics that littered their world. To a reformist faction, these observances were not enough. Whether driven by greed, curiosity, or faith, there were those that sought to utilize these gifts. To the majority, the Stoics, however, such thoughts were heretical. The emergence of such diametrically opposed philosophies paved the way for conflict, a conflict that would last for 100 years, culminating in 1,000 reformists seizing control of one such gift. A ship so ancient that its hull had become embedded in the rock of the planet. The faith of the Stoics prevented them from attempting to reclaim the artifact, fearing that they might damage it in some way. This gave the reformers time to explore the vessel and gain mastery over its functions. And so they would leave their world, tearing a piece from it as they left. Free from the restrictions of the Stoics, the reformists delved into the vessel's data stores, assisted by a biotechnological race known as the Huragok. From these data stores, they solidified their faith, learning of the great journey that the ancient Forerunners had undertaken, propelled by their holy rings. Their newfound freedom was not without costs. Before their exodus, they could recruit from the wholeness of their worlds. Now, confined to their new home, they numbered less than 1,000. It was only through the benefit of Forerunner technology and strict breeding policies that they were able to survive. And so, after a millennia of travel, these reformers came upon the world of Olgathon, their vessel alerting them to Forerunner artifacts, and a team was dispatched. More than finding technology, they found the Sangheli, a Saurian race that shared their reverence for the Forerunners. Attempts to work together soon faltered as the Sangheli regarded the San-Shayum's effort to modify and manipulate the artifacts as a blasphemy. They executed the San-Shayum among them, beginning what would become a decades-long war between the two species. The Sangheli outnumber the San-Shayum in both ships and soldiers. Their warriors were stronger and more skilled in combat. The San-Shayum were forced to rely on their much-vaunted vessel, and the technology they had been able to ascertain in their study of it. As the war dragged on, the Sangheli, unable to defeat the ancient vessel in direct combat, increasingly confronted with the possibility of their annihilation, were forced to question their deepest-held beliefs in order to survive. They began to modify what relics they possessed, their efforts bringing the conflict into a stalemate. The San-Shayum grappled with the prospect of there being potentially more dangerous foes in the universe, and the limitations of fighting a war with but a single vessel. Soon the causes of the conflict became irrelevant, and peace blossomed. Together, the San-Shayum and Sangheli bound themselves together in the Writ of Union. This document established and codified the Covenant, bringing about a new age of peace. And in this age of peace, the Forerunner vessel was retired from service. The rock which it had taken from the San-Shayum homeworld so long ago would serve as its resting place, the center of a new capital, a vast structure that would take some centuries to complete, an artificial world, High Charity. And it was from this new capital that Covenant power would expand outward, seeking new worlds blessed with artifacts, and finding with them new and varied alien life forms, each one a potential convert. These species were inducted into the Covenant and integrated into the caste system, which while nominally divided among warrior, worker, and religious strands, were in practice relegated to roles along racial lines. The Saiyan elevated to serve as the leaders, the voices of the gods. Only they could interpret the Forerunners' will, experiment with their artifacts, and serve as one of the Covenant's hierarchs. The Sangheili were to serve as their protectors and warriors, masters of the armed forces, and together they were the only races allowed to serve in the highest levels of government. Beneath them, an assortment of races, incorporated through faith, force of arms, or both. The Lekgolos, small, worm-like creatures capable of forming great gestalt assemblages or being incorporated into machinery. The Yanmei, insectoid and adaptable, capable of filling any role. The Kigyar, a saurian race with excellent senses dominated by their own avarice. The Geralhane, primitive and brutish species, whose rapid rise within the Covenant has stirred racial tensions. And at the bottom of Covenant society, the Ungoi, primitive and prolific, little more than a slave race, cannon fodder to drown the enemies of the faith with their sheer numbers. Such integrations were not bloodless, and throughout the long history of the Covenant, internal tensions rose to become open conflicts. All were crushed either with political maneuverings, empty gestures, or through overwhelming force. On February 23, 2525, a Kigyar vessel assigned to search for Forerunner relics at the edge of Covenant space made a fateful discovery of what their sensors believed to be thousands of Forerunner relics. The newly appointed hierarchs, Truth, Mercy, and Regret, believed this discovery would usher in a new age of reclamation. They were, however, shocked to discover these relics were themselves an alien species. Humans. Learning from an ancient oracle and artificial intelligence that this species had been chosen by them to inherit the Forerunner mantle. Recognizing such a truth would undermine their own power and destabilize the Covenant, the hierarchs embarked on a great crusade, declaring humanity an affront to the gods. And so, for 20 years, humanity, led by the United Nations Space Command, fought a desperate defensive action. In space, the Covenant held a commanding technological superiority, pinpoint slipspace jumps, shielding, and powerful plasma weaponry that could rapidly reduce human fleets to molten slag. Their forces only being halted by tenacious human defenders planetside, and should such a world prove to be too obstructive, the Covenant would use the overwhelming firepower of their fleet to burn away cities, forests, and reduce the surface of the world to glass. Humanity was pushed to the brink of extinction. Years of fighting and Sangheili leaders began to flirt with the heresy of questioning the Saiyan wisdom, wondering why humanity deserved extinction, wondering why they had not been offered a place in the Covenant. On the ground, their massed infantry offensives and sacrificial use of their troops led to some questioning the death of their friends, their clanmates. This would grow into a rebellion that raged at the fringes of Covenant society. The hierarchs became intransigent. Slowly, they began to foist more power and responsibility upon Tartarus, the chieftain of the Geralhane, relying on his blind obedience to the throne, a move which further inflamed tensions with the Sangheili. In 2552, Covenant forces, high on the successes of their victories at the human world of Reach, pursued a human vessel into unknown space, coming upon a holy ring of legends. Their celebrations, however, were short-lived. Fighting with human forces soon spread to the surface of the ring, and in their fighting, an ancient parasite, the Flood, was unleashed, and in the battles that followed, the Holy Ring would be destroyed. Within months, a second ring was discovered. Here too, fighting would spread to its surface. Unprecedented in the history of the Covenant, a hierarch was assassinated by human forces. The the Sangheili had failed in their obligations to the Writ of Union. Between this and the destruction of the First Ring, it provided the Hierarchs with the opportunity to raise the Jiralhanai to be their newly sworn protectors, to replace the Sangheili as commanders of the Covenant's fleet and armies. This act pushed the Covenant to the edge of civil war, a war that soon came as the lies at the foundation of their union were revealed. The purpose of the Sacred Rings was not the promised transcendence, but rather death to all life in the galaxy, with the purpose of starving out the Flood. The Hierarchs moved quickly to eliminate Sangheili leadership, and violence tore through the Covenant. Old rivalries laid plain. Sangheili and Jiralhanai fleet masters clashed, and the streets of High Charity became drenched with the blood of the fallen. In this fighting, the Flood returned, and what had been battle of ideologies and honor became a terrifying struggle of survival. Within hours, the Holy City had fallen. Despite these setbacks, the High Prophet of Truth remained, leading his loyal forces to the center of the Halo Network, a vast structure known as the Ark. There he sought to initiate the Great Journey, perhaps driven by piety, or perhaps having nothing left to lose. In those final moments, on the cusp of victory, he would be thwarted, the Sangheili and humanity united, if only briefly, in their efforts to bring about the end of the Hierarchs' machinations. The failure to initiate the Great Journey, the loss of High Charity, the death of the Hierarchs and ruling council, the exposure of the lie at the core of their beliefs. What remained of the Covenant shattered into warring states, the last dying embers of a once great fire.